Business owners who have an asset that's appreciated substantially over the last 10 years are going to see the exemption is going to get cut in half. Really, no matter what, whether it's 2025 or whatever, if you are generating an estate plan, a business succession plan, or management succession plan, whatever it is, the first step in the process is to understand what the value of your business is.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Ed Morales, Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer at the Pinnacle Group. Excited to have another edition of the Next Level Advisor. Speaking today, our guest is Steve Susel. Steve is Managing Director of Marshall Stevens. This is a 90-plus valuation firm. To really talk about today, yes, business valuation and the significance of that, but its correlation tied towards estate tax planning and what does it mean? And so, Steve, great to have you on the call today. It's always good to see you, my friend. How are you?
It's a pleasure, Ed. I really appreciate being able to be here and really talk about the topic because it's very timely and it's something that people have to pay attention to, particularly over the next 24 months.
So let's talk about that, Steve. You said the next 24 months, business valuation. What's happening out in the marketplace today with business owners, and to really kind of dovetail in your 24 months, what is so critical right now within 24 months for business owners? And what is that? When you say that, what do you actually mean? What's happening out there and what are the trends that you're seeing?
Well, the big date is December 31, 2025. And that's the day that the estate tax exemption provision that from the tax laws 10 years ago actually expire, or sunset is probably the better term, and revert back to what it was prior to that, which is essentially half. So what's going to happen is this coming year in 2024, the estate tax exemption for an individual is 13.6 million. Who knows what it's going to be next year, but it'll probably be in the $14 million range for 2025. And then at January 1, 2026, it is going to revert back to half. So we're a little less than half. So probably around the $6.5 million, somewhere between $6 and $7 million range. So business owners who have an asset that's appreciated substantially over the last 10 years are going to see the exemption from when they're doing their estate planning, or if they pass away, is going to get cut in half. So what was, 25, $26 million in exemption is going to go back to $12, $13 million in exemption. And that is an enormous change and really a costly change when you consider that if you're over the exemption, the effective tax rate is north of 40% for many individuals if you have assets valued. And when I say assets, it's not just your business asset, it's all your assets. Could be your life insurance, could be your house residence, could be your vacation home, everything in aggregate is going to add up and going to result in a lot of people owing a lot more tax than they think they do.
Hmm. So Marshall Stevens, talk to us a little bit about, you do business valuations, and if I'm not mistaken, one of your objectives and goals is really to assess, to evaluate, to form an indication of value. But as a business owner, and just for our audience here, I would assume that certainly the goal is to be able to get the best value possible. And I want to see there's a lot of things with looking in pursuit of getting the best value, but then how does that tie into estate planning? And because if I'm looking to get a greater value, but how do I kind of work through that? And from a planning perspective, and I know there's discussion out there that, well, business valuation, discounting valuation. Can you talk about what that looks like and how they work together or don't work together?
Sure. There are different types of valuation, and valuations are done for different purposes. You have a transaction value where somebody may be selling their business and maybe just flat out looking for maximum value. And that might be the absolute maximum value you can get from a buyer who's buying your business. And that's one value. On the other hand, the IRS primarily uses a standard called fair market value, which is kind of a middle of the road valuation, but it's a defendable value. And they've used fair market value for decades, and it's a tried and true methodology, and that's a lower valuation. But if you are gifting or trying to look at estate from estate issues, you may want to have the value as low as you can because you need the exemption, and you don't want to pay the taxes. So that's a different type of valuation. So you have estate and gift valuation on one end of the spectrum, which looks at a entity value and discounts it for a variety of reasons, whether it's a company specific risk, whether it's marketability, whether it's control, minority discounting. There are a variety of reasons to discount a business. But on the other hand, you have the value of a business on a transaction level, which may be much higher. And the object is to figure out what you need. And a lot of it depends on your circumstance in life. I mean, if you are running a business and you are doing an estate plan and you're not looking to sell the business, but maybe you're looking to gift some to family members, whether it's kids or grandkids or whoever's going to be follow on management or owners of the business, and you want to gift them a couple of percent. Okay, that's one type of valuation. You value the entity, you do discounted value because it's a minority value, and you deal with it that way. On the other hand, if you are selling to an ESOP or some other, kind of entity like that, fair market value, the middle of the road value is the predominant valuation methodology there. And as I said before, transaction value is the value that you're looking for maximum. You're looking for all the good synergies that can happen for the buyer from the transaction that makes them understand, okay, we can pay a little bit more for the business.
So there really isn't any correlation between the transactional value. Yes, that's super important, obviously, for a business owner, but transaction value versus some of the gifting you're talking about, they're not intended to be one and the same. They actually have
No,
application,
that
but if I'm hearing you correctly, they're completely different.
they are completely different. I mean, valuation is done using a methodology depending on the purpose of the valuation. And again, there are a variety of purposes. And our job is to work with you, work with their advisors, to figure out what the purpose of the valuation is and what the best methodology and outcome that should be employed to get to accomplish that.
Mhm. So let's talk about that part of it, your job in this regard. I mean, I'm curious, Steve, as you look at the marketplace today, you've mentioned the 24 months a moment ago. So what are you seeing here? I think a lot of times with business owners, equating the value of their business or that being part of their estate and just the practicality of what they do day in and day out, in many cases they may not be watching, so to speak. They're watching a lot of things relative to their business, but this idea of the application of estate planning to them and their business, can you speak a little bit about some of the missteps that may be happening out there as far as what business owners may or may not be doing as this as per se that this call to action?
I mean, it's a good opportunity, particularly from a gifting perspective, to do valuations now. Interest rates are up, that affects value. I mean, there's still a lot of money out there. There's still people that are buying businesses. They're buying for good businesses. They're looking to sell. There are buyers out there that have cash that are willing to buy these companies. There are a number of attractive industries out there where there's a lot of activity, and so valuations there are still higher. But in other cases, valuations have lowered to some degree because of, again, a lower number of deals taking place, a lower number of comparable transactions, and the higher interest rate when you factor those into to our modeling for value. And I think the business owner needs to be a little forward thinking here and figure out, okay, where do I want to be 5 years down the road? Because the time is now over the next 2 years to really try to set that in motion and to you may not complete the process, but you can get some good benefits from doing it now and getting the process going and really having that vision so you can navigate some of these changes that are going to be taking place. I mean, business owners have a lot of options, and the key for them is to be able to understand them and to work with their advisors to hear what the options are and make good decisions based on the what's going on in the market today.
Hmm. It's interesting, Steve, when you think about estate planning or estate tax planning, it typically, at least there's thoughts around that lands with an estate planning attorney or a tax attorney in that regard. Can you talk about why you see and is so essential to have, your component of this, and what you bring to the table? Because that sometimes is a misstep there, or at least I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, we work hand in hand with the estate tax attorneys and the accountants. I mean, they tee it up for us to provide a particular aspect of the plan. In order to in order to make a good plan, the first thing is you need to have to understand what the asset's worth. If you don't understand what your business is worth, then how can you make an educated or well formed plan and decide on what steps to take? You can't. You gotta understand that from the outset. So we will work with them to understand in preliminary form, kind of in the ballpark what the business is worth, so that planning can be undertaken. But then as you get down the road, you're going to hit various points in the process where a formal valuation is going to be required. If you are gifting to family members or other people, and your value is, if your value is, if you have a business that's worth enough money, you're going to have a formal valuation that you're going to attach to your gift tax return or whatever formal documentation you put together for IRS reporting. You're going to need a formal opinion from somebody like us that establishes value and justifies the discounts, and shows what the absolute asset is worth. And we work routinely with accountants, attorneys, private equity firms, other businesses who are trying to understand what value is and trying to establish that. And we're not competing with anybody. I mean, we've been around for 90 years, and so we have a particular methodology and perspective in creating a defendable being an important term here as well, valuation for reporting purposes.
Mhm. So when you think about businesses, I mean, there's a full spectrum to the small, to the mid-sized, to the large companies. Can you talk about the need for planning in this regard? I know you said there's a sense of urgency right now, or an opportunity. When you think about the services that you provide, does everyone, should every business owner be looking at their valuation, or where do you see the kind of the mark on this here?
If you are a business of a certain size, and we like to say, and it's kind of arbitrary, but we're saying if you have a revenue number of at least $5 million, you should probably have a good understanding about what your business is worth. Again, it's a little arbitrary, but at $5 million, you have substantial revenue. You have reporting requirements, most likely for taxes and everything. You probably have formal financial documents, balance sheet and income statement, and you have various events that are taking place or may take place that require you to have an understanding about what the value of the entity is. I
Mhm.
mean, plus, if you're a business owner and you want to grow the business, you should understand what your value drivers are and what helps create value and what people are looking at. But really, once you get to that $5 million in value and in revenue and up, it's important to have a good perspective. You don't have to have a valuation every year. You don't have to have a full formal valuation. We do a calculation of value that's an informal valuation, but it gives you a good ballpark for what the business is worth and allows you to, again, make decisions in an educated manner, knowing in general, how much, what the value of the business is.
Mhm. Steve, what about the structure of the company? Does it matter? Sole proprietor, LLC, C corp. When you think about some of the things we're referring to here, does it matter?
You know what? Business valuations should be done for any business as certain size. There may be some tweaks here or there in the methodology versus with a limited partnership versus an S corp and a C corp, and there's some adjustments that we make because we like to get EBITDA in a perfect world. We try to add back and make adjustments that are appropriate, but at the core level, it really doesn't matter whether it gets, what the business structure is. The importance is that you actually have the value so that then you can decide what to do with it.
Mm. So, Steve, I want to go back to your first comment around the 24 months that are here. So, what are your biggest concerns over the next 2 years here in preparation for this? What are you seeing if you were to say, "Gosh, this is the one thing that I'm most concerned about, that in some context maybe even keeping you up at night, is saying what does this look like?" Can you talk about what are some of the real concerns that you have going into the new year?
Sure, there are two perspectives here. One is from the business owner, and that's awareness. How many people are aware that this is changing? You have an opportunity to save a lot of money here if you have a substantially sized business. I mean, by saving a lot of money, I'm talking about your estate and your future heirs and all that. By doing stuff now, you are doing it before the change. The IRS has various rules, but basically there's, generally you're grandfathered in for the stuff you do now versus stuff that you may do after December 31 of 25. So it's important for people to be aware that this change is taking place, that it's going to affect their future, the value that they're going to pass on to future generations, and there are steps you can take now to make those changes. And that goes to the next issue is that all of a sudden awareness may kick in on July 1st of 2025 and everybody comes running and saying, "Oh, I've got to do something quickly now." You're going to be behind the eight ball to get something done if you wait too long. There are a lot of companies that are starting to line up now to figure out if there are steps they should take, or maybe they're updating their estate plan. Um, don't wait too late because you may get caught in a line to get stuff done and it may just not get done.
So, Steve, what is your recommendation for our listeners or advisors that are actually online right now? What would be your kind of their takeaways from our conversation today? What are the top couple things that come to mind that they need to be able to execute now?
Really, no matter what, whether it's 2025 or whatever, if you are generating an estate plan or business succession plan or management succession plan, whatever it is, the first step in the process is to understand in general what the value of your business is, because most likely it's the largest asset. Without understanding what the value is, you cannot put a plan together that it accurately reflects the situation. And we provide calculations of value that will give you a ballpark valuation. It's not a full formal valuation, but it gives you a nice range of value that establishes, again, in general, what the business is worth and can allow you to begin a discussion and begin the planning process. Really, that's critical. That's one step, and then really from there, um, you know, make a plan. I mean, talk about it. Figure out what you want to do. Having some foresight here, some planning. Business owners, many of them have budgets for 5 years. This is nothing different. You're making a plan, but this is for year two. This isn't even year 4 or 5. This is year two at this point. So you are time sensitive, time critical in terms of getting your stuff together, making a plan, and getting it executed over the next 24 months. And from an advisor perspective, being able to counsel your client that, look, this is what's going on. You need to pay attention. Whether they pay attention or not is up to them, but you've done them a service by making them aware of it and saying, we should reevaluate what your business is worth, what your estate plan is, in light of changes that are coming down the road. I mean, that's just good, sound planning from our perspective.
So, Steve, I know that we've had a relationship with Marshall Stevens for a number of years here. You're clearly part of our wealth transfer team, which is client facing. But it also sounds here that as you're providing the recommendations to our audience here, it's of such where you're an active participant in this process with advisors. Can you talk a little bit about, as you're providing the recommendations, I know firsthand that this is something that advisors are not running solo with, that you work in tandem with them. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience would look like for them?
Sure. The process is pretty straightforward in that, well, let's talk about the two different processes. First, let's talk about calculation of value, which is a preliminary valuation. We have a questionnaire that is very basic, and we ask for 3 years of financials, balance sheet, and income statement. We don't work with tax returns. And with that information, in a 10 or 12-day, 14-day period of time, we can come back with a range of value that will allow, based on fair market value standard, that will allow you to have a conversation with your client about what the general value of the business is. It's great for that first discussion, the planning purposes, great for determining if buy-sell funding is appropriate. It's a nice, basic first step that can be useful to everybody. After that, as the planning gets more serious, if the need is there for a full formal valuation for gift tax purposes, down the road for estate tax purposes, you know, that process is more in depth. The standard of value is the same, fair market value, but the process is a lot more in detail. We'll look at a larger universe of financials. We'll look at contracts. Um, we'll look at what the projections are in the future. We'll spend a lot of time digging. It is probably a 30 to 45-day process to get you a down to the penny value for the business and a per share value. And that is a defendable value from Marshall and Stevens. That's what people hire us for, to come up with defendable values that we sign and attest to, that or can then be used for government reporting, transactions, litigation, whatever that need is. But that process is more in depth, takes a little longer in time, but again, it provides a down to the penny value that we stand by.
Well, Steve, listen, thank you so much for joining Next Level Advisor today. I think again, as we look at what is very prevalent over the next 24 months, estate tax planning, you've mentioned reference to that. So I think it's just appreciate you being on the call. I know we're going to be reconvening because there's so many different things that are happening specifically over the next couple of months here, and look forward to having you on the call again.
Great. Thanks, Ed. We really appreciate it. I look forward to participating and talking with everybody, and we really appreciate our partnership with Pinnacle.